for some value of woohoo.
Hey folks, welcome to the Gateway API meeting for October 21st, 2025. This is the Pacific time zone meeting, although I am here, unusual. But we do have some things on the agenda that I wanted to be here for. So, yeah, as always, it's important to note this is a Kubernetes meeting. We abide by the Kubernetes Code of Conduct, which loosely boils down to be nice to each other. But that doesn't obviate us from having an agenda. uh, so, um, Flynn, you want to
That sounded,
walk us through?
that sounded for all the world like you were saying it boils down to be nice to each other, but we don't have to for Flynn's agenda item. Um,
I'm assuming Nick is just barely awake right now.
yeah, I was frankly impressed that Nick said October 21st when it is October 22nd for him. So
Oh
nicely
man,
done.
I've
Nicely
got
Yeah,
done.
so I
that's
got so
impressive.
good at time zone math, man. It's wild.
Yeah, I'm impressed. I actually do see a couple of people that I have not seen here before. So before we dive into the agenda, is there anybody who wants to introduce themselves, is willing to introduce themselves? You know, we don't bite much.
You hear me?
Sure, I can
Oh,
go ahead first.
sorry.
I cannot find this raise hand here as a Google Meet. Sorry for that, for jumping. But anyway, I'm Rusty. Some of you might know me already. I'm working with Ricardo most of the time, trying to push the TLS route to stable gateway releases cycles. And yeah, working with Rob from Google Cloud joining. Thank you for having me here.
Thank you for coming. I have also just pasted a link to the agenda doc in the chat so that y'all can add your names to that as well as see the agenda. Um, and I
Can
think
you guys hear me?
Xinhuan, were
Yep,
you gonna?
we can, you Stephen.
Oh, okay.
Actually, Stephen.
Hello. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I work for Microsoft. I'm Mike Morris's colleague. And I'm interested in working or fleshing out Ingress to Gateway a bit more. So looking
Cool.
forward to working with you all in the next few
Awesome.
months.
Yeah, I saw some of your issues on there already. Awesome.
Mhm.
All right.
Okay. So
And with
yeah, I
that,
think we've got everyone. Yeah, Flynn, do you want to take it away? Tell me where to click where.
how about go over to the GitHub discussion, which
Sure
is
thing.
linked there.
All right.
Over the past few meetings, we have talked a bit about some changes proposed for the upcoming release. There's a Google Doc about this. There were a lot of comments on the Google Doc, so we decided to move it over into the discussion format to hopefully make it a little easier to interact with. There are markedly few comments on the discussion, which I suppose might mean that we're all in agreement, or might mean that nobody likes GitHub. I don't know. Um, but if you scroll down a little bit, there are some questions here that I think, well, actually, let me back up. How many of y'all are unfamiliar with this enough that I should go through and summarize this? Anybody think that's a good idea, or should we not take the time?
I think it might be worth a very brief summary for the recording, if nothing else, Flynn.
All right. So there are a couple of things in here that mostly boil down to previously we have been trying to choose both the date and the content kind of up front. And if you look at software engineering as a whole, we tend to get into the place where we get to choose two of the following three: good, fast, and cheap. So if you want something to be good and you also want it to be fast, it ain't going to be cheap. The challenge with this in open source projects is that we basically always have to choose cheap because we're all volunteers. And that means that if we want things that are bounded in time, we cannot bound the content. And if we want to bound the content, it's very, very hard to bound them in time. For Gateway API, it feels important, at least for experimental, to be able to move more quickly and it feels important to generally keep releases happening on a sort of a predictable cadence. Part of this is just because it's nice for the health of the project for people to see that things are happening. But another part of it is that when you work in software, your opportunities for feedback from your users come when you make releases. So the more frequently you can make releases, the more opportunities you have to get feedback and the more opportunities you have to fix things. Everybody with me so far? All right. That means that what we're really talking about is a shift from trying to pick the time over picking the content, with the idea that if we pick that there's going to be a release, at the end of January 2026 for Standard Channel, come hell or high water, that is going to happen. And content that is not ready will just get shelved for a future release rather than us deciding to hold the release so that the content can come in. Most of the changes on here are aimed at that ultimate goal. There's another section here that is aimed at the idea that if we can release experimental much more quickly, then we can do a better job of getting feedback on experimental features and hopefully not making horrible mistakes as they go into standard. And so a certain amount of this also takes a page out of, honestly, Linkerd's runbook of do monthly releases of experimental that we do as automated snapshots from main to reduce the cost of doing an experimental release. A lot of the details in here are how do we do that without also risking breaking standard a lot? Again, this is making sense so far? Anybody have criticism, complaints, heckling? No? Okay, good. So, if we take a look at the discussions link, which Nick is sharing, change number 1 is choose the date, let the date rule the content. Number 2 is in service of that, rather than writing up 2 or 3 lines of idea and saying, oh yeah, that sounds like content that would be great to bring into experimental, actually write and get accepted a provisional GEP where you lay out what the change is, who wants it, why we're doing it, get that sponsored, and get some implementations to agree that if it goes into experimental, they will in fact implement it. That last bit feels like a huge change, but it is mostly taking an existing practical requirement and moving it earlier in the process. It's always been the case that if you put something into experimental and nobody implements it, you're never going to get it to standard. So by moving that, get some implementations to commit, we do 2 things. One of them is we get implementations to commit to agree that you'll have something to test. But we also end up using that as flow control for things going into experimental, because hopefully the implementations will not sign on to support more things than they can actually do. There's also a note in here of you have to get 3 implementations, but only 2 if it's a mesh feature. That is a practical consideration. There are frankly not enough meshes. If we say you have to have 3 meshes, that is getting dangerously close to requiring unanimous consent from all the meshes on the planet. That feels a little unreasonable. And I'm kind of going through this a little bit quickly, so if anybody has questions as I go, just sing out. Number 3 is also mostly a flow control issue. You get an item into the experimental channel. If nothing happens and it makes no significant forward progress, it will get removed after 6 months. I feel like this one was fairly poorly understood, which probably means it was fairly poorly explained in the beginning. This is intended to be a low bar. This is not, oh, you didn't get far enough, we're going to drop your stuff. This is more along the lines of, if you get something to experimental and then you don't do anything, we want to take it out so that other people have things that, basically so that reviewers can spend their bandwidth working on things that people are actually paying attention to. Candace, go ahead.
I'm
actually glad to see you here since you were the one with many questions on this.
I do have many questions, but I have already been told that it's useless to ask. So, but I can at least say something.
Yeah, I don't think it's fair.
I was certainly not trying to do that. Sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, it's already been decided is what I'm hearing. There's really no more debate. I don't know why we're even discussing it now. However, I will say that there are some details that I would like to see changed.
Mhm.
And I would like to see, if we're going to enforce this kind of, timekeeping and a watch on the 6-month low bar, then we need to appoint some people to be release police. And they need to be the ones who are watching this. I don't think it's fair for it to be arbitrarily enacted on someone. Like somebody says, I really hated that feature. Hasn't had any changes in 6 months. I'm going to say let's drop the guillotine on it. So I don't like the idea that this could potentially be gamed for dropping something that someone doesn't like, because they're the first to notice that it's been 6 months, that nothing has changed. And people have lives outside of this. So after 6 months is not a long time for some people, when there are other commitments that they need to pay attention to. Release
Rob?
police.
Yeah,
You go. That's you, Rob.
Yeah, go ahead, Rob.
agree.
I think you're
I
muted.
think that's
Yeah.
a good point. Okay.
Uh,
Okay. All right.
Okay, that's better.
Oh,
Now
I'm
go.
muted?
I think
Yeah.
you have issues with the
Okay.
internet.
Sweet. Okay. Hopefully better now. Yeah, so I think that's a great idea. I think we should, for lack of a better idea, we should say first meeting of every month. We have a process that runs through all gaps, checks, like we can script this. Obviously, we have metadata in gaps. We can check for all gaps that are currently in some kind of active state that have passed their expiry time. And we for moving the gap. But yeah, I think that would be very good to have a well-defined process.
Yeah, I because I'm sharing. Yeah, I agree. I do think that the other thing that we probably need to find is that it's fine for someone to say, I'm currently well in doing it and taking just like that's significant progress. Hey, like I go away and maybe a long time and I don't have time to find someone to do this work for me. Please not drop it until I'm back. Like that's not unreasonable, and like I would certainly be fine with doing that. Like this is not to sort of have a we can arbitrary things out. Right? The point of this is not to introduce a gameable system, right? Like the point of this is to be fair, but it's also the point of this is also to be fair to the people who are doing the reviewing, like
Yeah.
which is me a lot of the time. So I other stuck with 20 things in experimental and people being like, well, what's happening with this? Like that has happened a lot in the past, and we've ended up with a lot of things in perma experimental, which is an even worse experience than having to sort of justify that your thing is moving ahead every 6 months. And that's really what we're trying to avoid here, right? Like we're not like I don't want us to be like, hey, this is not busy enough, or I hate this feature, it's got to go. Like it's trying to be a way to make sure that we don't have too many things in experimental that no one is caring about.
I think it's pretty clear that there are features that people hate that we have not removed. So,
yes, very true. Candace was first.
yep.
Are you sure Mike Morris wasn't first? Or
Nope.
No,
You're
you
first.
can go.
Zoom does them in order, so
okay. So I actually have a different topic that I wanted to bring up to back up to point number 2. So if Mike Morris has something that he would like to say about the 6-month incubation period or whatever we call it, then go ahead, Mike.
No, you can go first.
Okay, so I also
Actually,
have,
sorry, Candace, before we go back to point two, I added the note, what Rob was saying about handling this with a public review, probably the first meeting of every month. So I went ahead and added that in. I think that's a great idea.
In here. So should I refresh?
It's already on your screen, actually, if you look at the
Oh.
bottom sub bullet of point three.
Okay, cool. Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Candace. Point two.
point two, yes. So getting sponsors before you've done anything. That seems a little bit
Getting-
problematic to me. So you need to get
Wait.
you need to get sponsors before you can even get an item into the experimental channel. This seems a little bit backwards because there is some interplay between, putting something out there, using that as your way of convincing somebody that they might want this feature, and collaborating back and forth, getting someone to help you review it that wants the feature as well. But the idea of having someone commit before you even have anything to show them in terms of a gap, that
you
doesn't.
would definitely have them have a gap to show, or
That's the idea
maybe a
is that
better
you
way of
merge the
phrasing that
gap.
is.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead,
you-
Nick.
Yeah, you merge the gap with a provisional thing, which is the who, what, and why, someone might want this feature. And
Yeah.
then that is the thing that you then iterate on as before you are ready. And then the thing that is required for you to merge another PR to that on top of that gap to actually do the move to experimental is for people to have signed up to say, yes, yeah, my implementation would implement this feature once it moves to experimental. So it's not that
Okay.
you have to have the
Yeah.
right, like it's the idea is you merge a gap at provisional and
Which you can do anytime.
yeah, which
Yep.
is you and then you add on top, do another. It doesn't all have to be done in one PR. Is I guess the
Okay.
key difference that
Yeah.
we're trying to go for here is that we're
That's,
trying to also move this away from having to have a single PR with 400 comments on it, right? Like, because I know how much that sucks, right? Like, and so like the intent here is to sort of make it more of a thing that it's okay to have a gap merge with a bunch of unanswered questions, right? Like as long as those unanswered questions are documented in the gap and say, hey, here's some things we haven't figured out yet. These ones we've got to come back to before we can move it forward to the next stage. Because it's okay
Okay.
to have that from provisional to experimental. And it's okay to have that for experimental to standard.
perfectly fine. It's not clear in the overview of changes here, but we could add
So,
it to it, I'm
Yeah,
sure.
so I actually
However,
yep, go. I'm just pulling up a thing while you do that.
the idea of needing sponsors makes me think that we are, we are consumers, we are integrators of Gateway API. We're not like implementers of Gateway API.
I'm sorry, which we is this?
Which we is my organization.
Your organization. Okay.
Yeah. So we Red Hat. So we have an implementation that we've chosen. If we can't, if we can't convince that one implementation to do this, doesn't matter to us what other implementations are doing this. So I hate to say that this is something that makes, if we are not implementers, this is a big problem for us. So do you want to discourage people who are not implementers from actually coming up with new features? Or
No,
kind of
flat
this
out
is
no.
kind of
what it
already have
feels.
that
Definitely
problem,
not.
don't you?
Yeah, we do have that problem, but this makes it worse.
Also,
It makes it earlier.
Yeah, like the intent here is to get that problem like out of the way earlier, right? Like, yeah, like because you would have had that problem when you were ready to move your thing from experimental to standard. And look, that happened, right? Like, for backend TLS policy, that happened. Like we were like, hey, we're ready to move this to standard, and a bunch of people were like, whoa, like right at the last minute. And that is a crappy experience for you. It was a crappy experience for everybody. And like that's one of the reasons why we're trying to pull this stuff forward is to be like, hey, your some implementations have to sign up to do this thing, and then those implementations, it's kind of on them to actually care about this thing and to be doing that. If you're an implementation that said, yeah, we're going to do this, and then this moves into experimental and then it's ready to move to standard, and that implementation is like, oh no, sorry, I've got huge problems with this. It's like, well, that's not the project's problem. That's your problem for not checking this, right? Like, but if we don't have a way for the implementations to sort of sign up and say, I care about this, then we don't have a sort of way to say, well, you said you cared about this and you didn't care about it enough to look at the PR, so too bad, right? Like, but like because I mean, I want to be clear, like I consider that a huge problem, right? Like if you're going to say we care about this and then not care about it by looking at PRs and then come back and have significant problems with it near the end, that's a problem, right? Like that is a huge problem for Gateway API as a project, right? Like we cannot have that happen. And so, we need to sort of reduce like the possibility of that happening. And one of the ways we're going to do that is by pushing this stuff forward. I completely agree with you that as someone who doesn't control an implementation, it's harder for you. It makes like for users who don't control implementations, it may be harder to get implementations interested. That said, like there's a bit of signal there that if you can't get implementations interested, then it's like, well, like why is that? Why is there a disconnect between the thing that your users are asking for and the things that implementations want to do? Is it just resourcing, or is it that there's a mismatch in the concepts, or something else is going on here, right? So
or is it a mismatch in communication?
Yeah, right. Like so, but that's a very valuable conversation to have once the thing is in provisional and you're trying to push it forward. And so,
and it is a much more valuable conversation to have early rather than late.
But you know what, guys, we're really going into like enterprise decisions now, and this is not an open source kind of
I don't understand how we're doing that, right? Like the intent here is to make it open source by saying, hey, like because the converse to this is if we don't have this rule, right? Like what's going to happen is a bunch of stuff is going to go into experimental. People are going to put a bunch of work in pushing it forward. And then it's going to come time to go to standard, and it's likely that at some point there are going to be features where the implementation is like, no, I'm not doing that. I can't do that. That is not possible for me. Or like it is likely that the sort of thing will happen.
It can happen anyways, even with these changes.
Yeah, but like at least this way you haven't wasted 12 months like building an API and getting it ready to go to standard, right? Like that's why this is like a fail fast, get signal early kind of thing. That if the implementations are going to be like hard no, it's better to know that like earlier, right? Like and that's it's not about enterprise or stuff like that. Like it's about like trying to make sure that our community is not wasting time building things that no one's going to use, that no one's going to implement. Sorry,
I mean, this is forcing our hand. We probably need to pick a different implementation if this is going to be the case, because we have had some trouble getting the people whose implementation we currently use to be interested in the features that we're interested in. So so it's forcing our hand. It's an enterprise decision that's coming up.
Sorry,
but
yeah, like.
Is it really?
We chose the wrong. We chose the wrong implementation.
Your hand, or is it bringing up a decision that you see on the horizon anyway?
So,
because if you're already having trouble getting the implementation you chose interested in building things, aren't they going to continue to be? That feels like a problem you have, whether we're talking about looking at that early in the GEP process or looking at that late in the GEP process.
It's something that we've struggled with from the beginning. So it's just this process makes it worse for us. So I mean, I would like to let someone else talk about something different. I feel like I'm hogging the conversation, but I mean, this is really problematic for us, and I don't know, maybe we should make our own implementation, and then that's how we'll game the system, I guess.
I mean, I don't think gaming the system. So like I'm actually kind of curious about this, because I think that banking on an existing implementation that you do not have direct upstream engagement with, like, is a risk to building a business on top of that. And like that is kind of a challenge of an enterprise model where you're not involved in that. So like one way is to be more directly involved in the implementation that you're dependent on so that you can have a more active voice there. Other like perspectives are like, yeah, you can also just like track like, is this implementation aligned with kind of the objectives that I see and the cadence that I want to see in terms of like their philosophy of like how they're adopting features and like what they're prioritizing in terms of their development. So like there's a few different ways to approach that, but also I would hope that most implementations do care about their users. So it's not just a question of like
I would hope that too.
like we picked the wrong implementation. I would hope that like if a substantial customer base of that implementation cares about a feature, then there will be a way to make that known to the maintainers of that implementation. So so I'm kind of speaking in a position of like I represent multiple implementations, one of which we do have an active stake in upstream development for, and another is Microsoft implementation, where we're not as involved, but and they also like don't implement experimental, but like we're in active communication with them because that team has specific objectives and customers that they care about. So I've seen a few different models of this approach, and yeah, I think you can't really afford to just like take a back seat and hope that an implementation that you're not actively involved with is going to do things the way and priority that you expect and require for your business needs.
Thomas?
Yeah. Two things. I was wondering that I see how it makes sense to get it earlier in the process if something has a chance of, of getting the support it needs. I see how that could work. I can also see the other side of it, that it might stifle innovation because it's harder. And then my question would be, how transparent is the get 3 sponsors process?
What we have
How
been
clear is
talking
that?
about, what we've been talking about so far is actually including it in the GEP itself
Okay.
and saying, these are the implementations that are willing to do this.
Yeah.
I don't
So-
think that's written into this because there was some discussion about how we wanted to do that, but I
Yeah.
personally think that needs to be a visible and transparent piece of this.
It
And that
100%
if you,
must be,
yeah,
right? Like everything that we do in Gateway API needs to be transparently recorded. Any voting that we've done in the past has been transparently recorded. Like
yep,
we have always erred on the side of there's no like we try not to make decisions behind closed doors, right? Like I mean, sometimes, say in the case of security things, you got it, but like generally for organizational things, for GEP things, we have always erred on the side of we are very transparent about why certain things got picked, what criteria we use to pick things, all that sort of stuff, right? And so the details that we haven't figured out here are exactly where do you go as an implementation to say yes, I will do this. Where is the place of record, right? Like, but like to for implementation to do that, I 100% agree with Flynn that the eventual destination of that is a section in the GEP that says the following implementations have agreed, and here is the link to the GitHub comment or some other persistent thing where they did that, right? So that's not only is there a record that they did agree, but there is a link to the thing where they like that shows that they actually did, and that needs to be publicly visible, right? Like those are the sort of organizational things that we have to do to make this fair, right? Like if you can't be like, oh, implementation B told me over Slack that they do it. It's like no. Like, it has to be done in public. It has to be visible to everybody, and there needs to be a permanent record of that in GitHub somewhere that's persistent there, but also in the GEP that links to the GitHub.
And how transparent should the part before that be? Like the part from where, let's say, I have an idea, I draft the first draft.
Mm-hmm.
Who should I contact? And then what's the process happening then behind the scenes for when they come back to me?
So the intent here is, you have an idea, you raise, so that actually, let's go. Here's one I prepared earlier. So like this is the intended flow for the get process, right? Like the first thing is you have an idea. You talk to the community about it. You come to a community meeting, you post in Slack, you talk to the community and say, hey, I want to do this. Is there interest in this? If there is, you create an issue that sort of outlines exactly what it is you want to do. Then you open a PR using that GEP name, and that's the provisional one. So that needs to have the who, what, why. I put some, there's like, I updated this very recently. And so like, the idea of provisional is that you agree on the goals, right? Like who is doing this? What is this change for? Like, but you don't specify how the change is going to happen. Like what is actually going to be included in that change, right? Like, and then so the only thing that you need here is you need to merge a PR that people have agreed on. For those PRs to merge, a maintainer has to approve it and someone else has to LGTM it, right? So you have to have two people to do that. That has to happen. It's already in public. Or any discussion on that PR already in public, right? So that then you have an artifact in the form of a GEP that will appear on a page like this. That and then you can then say, okay, now I've got this thing. You go back to the community, you say, hey, I've got this issue. I think we should do it. Could I get are there any implementations here that are interested in doing this? Do it by coming to the community meeting and asking. Do it by putting it in Slack in public, right? Like if you are interested in this, please put something on the GEP issue. Here's the link to the issue, right? Like,
right. And the 6-month deadline is not in this phase.
No,
Correct.
the 6-month deadline is when that clock starts ticking when you
merge with the sponsors.
Yeah, when you actually merge. So like technically what happens is you actually will merge an implementable GEP, right? Like that's the phase where it's like, hey, we've got like API design ready to go, and then you actually move it to experimental when you make the actual go types changes. But I think the gate here drops at when you move it to implementable, because that's when then the experimental thing is like a functional thing where you've actually made the go changes. That's why there's a distinction between those two phases. But like that's when the 6-month clock starts ticking. And again, the key part here is you don't like doing anything on the GEP resets the clock. Every time you make another PR on top of your GEP, every time you update the things, every time you do a conformance test, every time you do anything to do with moving this GEP forward, that resets the clock back to 6 months from that date. Right, like that's the intent here. That like obviously we're not going to have automation or anything to do that, right? Like, but that's the intent here is right that to start with. But the intent here is that eventually we will, right? Like that, and that that's what Flynn means about it being a low bar, right? Like if you're like, hey, we've got this in experimental, and I had some ideas for conformance tests, boom, that's reset your 6-month clock, right? Like it's not intended to be hard to reset the 6-month clock. It's just we want you to be doing something.
Right. And as Nick pointed out, showing up on Slack and saying, hey, there's this going on. It's going to be another month or two. Okay, fine.
Right. Yeah, that's activity, right? Like that's you saying, yes, I know that this is on me, and that's showing activity. That's all we need to do is show life. Yeah. Key.
As Rob points out, we've spent 37 minutes on this one.
We do have a lot of other stuff to talk about.
We have other stuff. Guy, did you want to add something to the first 3 points here?
That's right. Let's see if I can make this very quick, right? Kids, I don't want to feel like Red Hat's monopolizing the conversation here by no means. But I think I do see where Kenneth's criticism is coming from, and I have to say I have zero syncing with Kenneth about this particular topic beforehand. So this is my own interpretation of things, and I think it also has to do with what Thomas was saying before. But to Mike's point on obviously Red Hat betting on some upstream open source project to build a business out of it is nothing new for Red Hat, right? Throughout its over 30 years of history, that's pretty much what has been doing, right? So that's not really the point. I think the point is, and to inspire maybe some self-criticism for this particular group here, is on whether some of the constraints we are putting couldn't be backfiring and ended up incentivizing the exact opposite of what we actually want, which is faster innovation, right? Because while before we had a situation where those constraints did not exist. And by only having to sync with one particular implementation, that implementation was kind of free, to decide on how to innovate and how to do. But now, obviously, all those innovations are committed to a particular standard. So my worry is whether we are not hardening too much the constraints and risking running into a kind of a catch-22 kind of situation here, where one implementation says, now I'm committed to a standard, so I cannot do anything unless I had an agreement with a couple other implementations as well, because otherwise I would be deviating from that standard, even if it's still experimental. So maybe one thing that could be done is, I don't think we should loosen that constraint by no means, but at least define it well enough so the implementations can agree on what level of commitment they have to a particular a new feature. So maybe they do not have to say, okay, we're going to implement this, but they can commit to trying things out, at least while they are experimental. And even if in the end they end up voting again and say, you know what, we tried this out, it didn't work, we're not ready to support this moving to standard. Something like that.
I mean,
Yeah,
to me, that sounds like what experimental is supposed to be anyway. If you do something
saying
as an
that you're going to
experiment and you
implement something for experimental is not a guarantee that you're going to implement it for standard, right? Like
my point is, it only takes one to get to experimental. That's my point.
So
the other ones are saying, okay, let's see where this goes.
So the problem
I
here.
wanna-
So
Go ahead, Rob.
I know you're gonna time check us, Rob. The thing that
Yeah, well,
you go.
Go ahead, Rob. You've had your hand up 3 times and haven't talked yet.
Thank you. Yes, this whole idea, or this part of the constraints is actually my idea. So I will take responsibility for the bad or good part of it. Or I think I don't know.
It's your idea with support from other folks, right?
Sure. Yeah. But I basically what we focused on is this being a new requirement, but I want to highlight the idea that this is changing. This is replacing something. So what we had before and what we've had so far is basically a popularity contest. And what that's resulted in is if you weren't one of the top four most popular features in a given release, you didn't fit in, which was even more exclusive. And even still, when we had that popularity contest, sometimes a popularity contest was gamed in really annoying ways, so that something would get through, use one of those 4 places, and still not end up being broadly implementable, and we'd have to scrap it, right? So a wasted spot. And so this is really trying to...
I feel like that happened a lot, actually.
It did, unfortunately. And so this is really trying to shift that and actually make more spots available, but make sure the spots that we're making available have a very solid path from out of experimental, because we really are trying to avoid experimental getting overloaded. But I do, yes, you're right. I should time check everyone. So
the last thing that I wanted to say here is, like, the thing that we want to avoid here is having 30 things in experimental and none of them move forward, because everybody is busy shouting at Rob and me and the other approvers, why aren't you approving my thing? Right? Like, and we end up being like, no, sorry, like, we've only got a space to review so many things per week. Your things are just going to have to wait, right? Like, and that was what the original scoping thing that we were doing was trying to do. It was trying to deal with the fact that approvers are and always will be relatively constrained on bandwidth, right? Like, we do not want to have 20 approvers for GEPS, because it will be impossible to have a group that big be on the same page about what stuff should be in the API, right? Like, that's not possible. We need to have a relatively small group of people who are the final sort of approvers. Those people are always going to be bandwidth constrained. So the idea here is to try and make it so that the approvers don't need to worry so much when the things are in the early stages. People can iterate without it having to always be like the approvers like signing off on everything. But we can't do that without a way to sort of get changes in quicker. And the thing that Rob is talking about is very real. We've had it happen. There was definitely one in this last release where a feature made it into scoping that then fell out of scoping because no one worked on it, right? Like, people signed up, people got a bunch of people in their company to upvote it like 40 times or something like that. That was the only thing that we were taking into account. The feature got in. That meant that someone else's feature who probably would have worked on it got cut. And that meant they were like, well, there's no point in me doing anything on this. I'll come back in 6 months. Right? Like that's what we want to avoid. And that's why we're pulling that forward, is so that we can be like, you have to be like, here is my idea. And you can't just say, my idea is here's 2 sentences. You have to put some effort in and actually define what your idea is. And then once you've done that, you can say, hey, is anyone interested in doing this? I would guess almost everything that I have seen, someone is going to be interested in doing. Right? Like I have never seen anybody propose something here that someone is not interested in implementing. Never.
They might
sometimes
they might still not stand up and agree to it because they might realize that there's other stuff they have to do, but that is a good thing.
Yeah. Right. Like, and so it's not about making people's lives hard, right? It's about making it so that everybody has a fair shot at getting their things in. And if you push harder, then your thing will come in faster. That's what we're trying to create here. Is we're trying to make it so if you have 10 people lined up to actually work on this thing, then you can make the changes quicker and you can get your things in quicker. And that's what we're trying to push forward here, right? Like, right, the thing that we have at the moment is the worst of both worlds. That was what Flynn was trying to say before, right? Like what we have now sucks, and it sucks in ways that we think we can improve by doing this. If this doesn't work out, this process will change, right? Like this process is not written in stone. If we're going to try this, and if we find it doesn't work, we'll change it. The same as we're changing the current release process, right? Like just because this process does not, like we're writing this process down now, we're trying to do the best we can, but that doesn't mean it's going to be perfect. It's not. We're going to need to make changes, right? Like, just because the words are written down doesn't mean that we can't change them. So I think I've probably said enough.
I'm going to add 2 more things really quickly to that. The first one is to Guy's point about, previously only one implementation could go ahead and do something. Yeah, I mean that you can still do that. You can still go off and have one implementation go and implement a feature that they think will be cool. And hopefully they will then use that as prior art to inform a GEP to bring it in and make it part of the standard. So hopefully they'll be thinking about doing something in a way that would be relatively easy to add. But we don't say that if you are doing Gateway API, you're not allowed to do your own APIs as well. So as Rob is fond of reminding me a lot of the time. But yeah, that's still a thing that you can do that can still be very useful. The other thing I would say to Nick's point about the current model sucking is that I think it's also worth pointing out that the current model sucks in a lot of ways that are not very visible to most of the people on the call, but are very, very visible to anybody who's making the sausage. And some of this is very much trying to expose some of that and make it a little bit more clear. But yeah, we have burned a lot of time on this one. We will continue with the Git doc. I have updated the GitHub discussion already during this. We will continue with that. We already have work going on for validating admission policies. There's a comment that I made about the reliability or potential sources of lack thereof for snapshots. So ultimately, I think that we have already seen people who are writing GEPs that they intend to get into provisional and lining up some implementations that they think are going to be working on them. I think that's excellent. I don't think there's a reason we should stop that while we continue with refinements on this one. Anybody else have any last minute things they wanted to add on that? All right. Going once, going sold or something, or gone at least. Next on the agenda is someone who's not me.
Stephen.
Yes.
Stephen, yes. Thank you.
Yes. So
Lost my window for a second.
I'm looking to flush out Ingress to Gateway a little bit, specifically for Ingress and Nginx. I'm looking to support all annotations that can currently be expressed in Gateway API. I'd also be open to adding some sort of integration tests. But to do that, I need people to review my PRs. And I put 1 or 2 out last week in Gateway API, and it hasn't gotten much traction. And the best way I know to beg for reviews is to come to the meetings. So here I am.
I think that's completely fair. I think, yeah, like the person who's actually on your reviews is Lior, who is not at this meeting, but I will try and take a look at the Gateway API 1.4 upgrade at least, man. I also do want to call out one thing that I was very impressed by that you did, man, which was on this issue. This comment is I think is probably close to a record, even beating out some of my ridiculous efforts on one of the longest comments we have, but it's also amazing. So thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Like this is a really great sort of run through. This is every single Ingress Nginx annotation, and if Stephen can see it being possible to do in Ingress to Gateway today. So like very impressive work, man. Just wanted to quickly call you out for that. That's awesome. I think that having someone spend some more time on Ingress to Gateway is great. And I think I will try to get to the reviews as much as I can, man. But review bandwidth is scarce, so I gotta.
This one is actually my bad. Sorry, I've been doing other stuff and I missed the PR, but I think I have both of the hats on Ingress Nginx and Ingress to Gateway. So feel free to ping me on Slack and keep poking me like, hey, can you finish this review? I will try to start that as soon as possible as well.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much.
Awesome. That means we are now moving on to Rosty's TLS route changes. This one I definitely have some thoughts about. Is there any other short ones that we should hit, folks, before because like I definitely have thoughts about this one as well. So
I think it's going to be hard to find a time where both you and Rosty are at a meeting together. So I would
let's do it now.
For,
yeah,
let's
do it live. Yeah. Okay, so let's pop open this your proposal here. So looking at your slides here, Rosty, can I try my sort of thing that you're saying here and see if I get it right? You can correct me. Is that okay?
Sure. We can go.
Yeah. So from what I see, the change that you're proposing to make is that you can basically do what you can do in TLS route today multiple times in a single TLS route, right? Like you move you're moving the hostname match inside the matches stanza, and making it so that you can have multiple TLS routes inside a single TLS route. So the question I want to ask you is like, why? Like, what is bad about having a TLS route and a service needing to live together as opposed to doing this? Because right now, what this is doing is to me, it seems like the main thing that this is doing is meaning that you now have two single points of failure where like multiple people are going to need to edit a single thing, right? So when we do it with a gateway and in this approach, there's only one place where where multiple people might need to edit the thing, which is the gateway. And even in the TLS route case, generally you don't need to do that if you write the listeners correctly so that they can fit all of the host names in the TLS route. Whereas this way, you now have a shared resource, the TLS route, that needs to be coordinated on and edited by multiple teams. And those teams need to ensure that they don't squash each other's changes, they don't patch over each other, you don't have any eventual consistency problems with editing the TLS route, and you need to make sure that those things are in there. One of the reasons why we broke it apart is to avoid that sort of eventual consistency problem, which is rife in Kubernetes. So could
you go to slide number 4? I think that should explain what you're talking about. So we are not forcing people to use one TLS route. So if somebody wants to use multiple TLS routes on this picture, they feel free to go and use it.
Yep.
What we're trying to do is we're trying to bring a similar user experience that HTTP routes have to TLS route world. So you can have multiple HTTP routes, you can have one HTTP route. But the key point, the key difference is that route is a routing table. It allows you a natural fan out. Example, imagine a client-side load balancing with MongoDB shards. So where each service represents a separate MongoDB shard. And then a shard can be indicated by SNI. So you have 100 shards, you have 100 services. With the current API, you would need to have 100 TLS routes. Although you still have one service owner, one service MongoDB owner. Adding a new service would require adding you a new TLS route. Adding 5 new services, 5 new TLS routes. While in the HTTP route world, you just update the routing table based on path, based on other metadata. But in TLS world, we only have metadata available as SNI and LPN. And today we are not enabling LPN matching at all, although it's not even a matching discriminator, it's more like a filter. So
Yeah,
that's
so
the proposal.
yeah, so I understand. The other thing that I'm worried about here is like, how does this work with the existing hostname intersection infrastructure, right? So does this mean that, so what this would mean is now you're going to need a status per match, because it's possible that some host names in that thing will not match the listener host name, right? Because the listener host name and the TLS route, all of the host names on the TLS route will need to intersect. And so now we're also going to have to change the status stanza to be able to handle the fact that some of the listeners like may be valid and some of them may be invalid, right? Like some of the matches, like, so like it means that ideally that status would now have to have like we have in gateway for listeners, we'd have to have a descendant status that's like, here's the matches and here's the status for each one, right? Like the, like I understand what you're saying, right? Like I see the point that you're making, that yes, the routing discriminator for TLS route is the only thing we have available is SNI. In HTTP route, we have a bunch of routing discriminators, some of which are path, headers, all that sort of stuff. So like making the user experience similar to HTTP route is desirable. The problem is that hostname is a special case. The hostname has special case handling because it's available on the gateway listeners, on listener set listeners, and on and on TLS route listeners, and on HTTP and on HTTP route. It's already pretty complicated with just those three things. I don't know if you saw the like 70 to 80 reply thread about how hostname intersection works in Slack the other day, but like I had to sit there and write out like I don't know, 50 to 100 lines of sort of like, if this then this, and this is how this works, for people to be able to understand how the intersection worked. I'm worried here about the level of complexity we are adding to hostname intersection in doing this. And so like I see what you're saying. I personally, like, I'm not like, again, like, I mean, I have the, like, I effectively am saying no because like I'm saying like I need to be convinced here, but like I'm not saying I can't be convinced. I'm just saying like I'm not convinced, right? Like I don't currently feel that the gain in flexibility, like for a relatively, like I'll admit, relatively limited set of users, is going to be worth the addition of complexity to other users who don't care about this specific use case. And so you see what I'm saying? Like like that's the trade-off we have to make here, is if we add this, we're actually adding a bunch of possible complexity that the API needs to handle. And that's what I'm worried about, is that we're adding the possible complexity. Ricardo put his hand up a while ago though, so I should let him go.
Yeah, I was just wondering how we deal with that on HTTP route when you have two HTTP routes with the same host name and conflicting paths on both of them on the status as well.
Conflict resolution rules take effect to resolve the hostname intersection. That means that the oldest HTTP route by creation time wins the hostname, like gets the hostname, and then its paths win. Right, so because the other HTTP route that has the same hostname and the same path, because the conflict resolution means that the oldest creation date one wins, that means that that one will always win. And so and then the newer HTTP route with the matching hostname and path, it does not get accepted.
Okay.
Yeah. And so again, that's the other thing that's the other thing why the status becomes a problem, is that it's possible in this TLS route, like, it's unlikely because it would be stupid for people to do this, but the API needs to be able to handle what would happen in this case of, in the case that we have on the screen, what happens when 1-sh.mdb is the specific hostname on the gateway, right? Like, is the specific hostname on the gateway listener that you're attaching to. What happens to 2-sh.mdb, right? Like, that rule will never be applied, right? And so like there needs to be some way to surface that rule is ineffective and will never be applied. The way we normally do that, when in this case, is by saying, hey, hostname intersection failed, the TLS route is not accepted. And so if we want to be able to do that in this case, we would need to substantially mutate the status of the TLS route to carry that information. So like,
Okay.
yeah. So
what is confusing to me, it's like that we said on TLS route that we also accept like all of those merges using like wildcards on the host name, you know. So we already have some sort of complication on TLS route, and I'm trying to understand how this makes more complicated than today just needing to have all of those matches also on wildcards on TLS routes versus doing something specifically like you know, per host name and matcher.
So how do you mean? Explain to me more what you're saying about wildcards on TLS routes.
So the idea of TLS route is like the SNI matching, right? So during the discussion of the gap, one of the things that Mike raised, it's like we are keeping, you know, the same behavior of HTTP route, where you can have like a listener with like example.tld, like something.example.tld, and then I would have on my TLS route wildcard.example.tld, right? And then you are actually needing to do all of those matches on the opposite side. So you already need to figure that out, if like whatever you are matching from the TLS route or any TLS routes, you know, like.
Yeah, so I think, like, to be honest, if I was going back to write the hostname intersection stuff again, I would probably prohibit the routes from having wildcards at all. That say those must be specific only, because
we can't do that on TLS route because it's not stable yet, right?
Yeah, so we can say that, and that will help with that specific thing, right? That means that makes the hostname intersection calculation a bit easier. It doesn't like help with Rosti's proposal, because like the whole thing is about like the fact that we have to do hostname intersection at all, right? Like, so
I'm pretty sure that won't work for people like ngrok either, because I think they rely on, I should check, but I think they rely on wildcard routing.
Do they? Okay.
So
yeah,
I don't know how involved they are in Gateway API, to be clear, right?
Yeah,
I know that they offer it, but
that may be one of the reasons why we didn't do it at the time. But so so generally, you like, if this was any other property other than hostname, I'd be cool with it. But like, hostname is already so overloaded, and we have so many problems with people understanding what we have today. Like, Ricardo has opened a gap that I suggested we need to write a memorandum that actually explains how the hostname intersection works, because most people don't get it, and it is hard to understand. On top of that, we've got the other gap that Mike Malecki, I think, opened about defining how, like, that, which was another, like, hey, like, Quadrant has an external DNS provisioner. We need to define how that works. Like, we've got a couple of requests for people to define this behavior a bit more. So, like, that's the other reason.
We are over time, by the way.
Yeah, I'm especially reluctant to make any changes. That's it. I'm done.
Yeah, I just want to be. Okay, we should have more discussion offline, because I think there's something here. I just want to call out, like, I would love to get Mesh's feedback on this, because in my opinion, the current TLS route usage, where you can basically specify a single SNI, like, it feels not as useful for Mesh as something that allowed multiple matchers and, basically multiple rules in a single route. Seems potentially very useful for Mesh. But yeah, I know we're past time, so let's continue this offline.
Thanks much to everybody for joining, and especially for all the feedback on the release stuff. I really appreciate it. Thanks for staying up late, Nick. I hope it was worth it.
Well, this is why I wanted to be here, because I saw there was some juicy items.
Yep.
Thanks.
Thank you. So thank you, Rusty. And to be clear, Rusty, I really do appreciate the proposal. Like, I do want to talk to you some more about it. I want to dig into it more. But like, I think I think that those are the questions that I want to give you to think about today. Okay.
As you are here, we are actually planning to discuss a bunch of that on KubeCon, if people are around as well. Like me and Rusty are going to be there. I know that you're not going to be there, but also we want to get.
Please take notes. Please take notes.
We should try to go through and figure out when we want to meet at KubeCon and things like that too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Rob
Did you raise your hand on the way out, Rob? I think you did. Okay, so I think we'll call it there. Norman, I did see your feedback about the change thing. I do think it's really great feedback that we need to talk about, but we just didn't get time to get to it today. Sorry.
Sounds good. I'll update
I'm
you,
sorry,
everyone.
which feedback are you talking about there, Nick?
So Norman had some other feedback. He had some more feedback about the monthly versioning and stuff like that. But,
Yeah, I would agree that there's some interesting stuff in there.
Yeah. So yeah, like so to final before I hit finish on the recording, I don't think that what Candace has said in the chat is correct. It's not already 100% been decided. Like we definitely can still make changes. But I think the fact that we will be changing something
making
has been
changes.
decided, right? Like we will not be leaving the process as it was before. Something is going to change. So the thing that we are doing is defining what those changes look like. So
and Norwin, if in particular, I have to figure out how to phrase this one. Right. If you are looking at this from the perspective of a Go-based implementation and you have feedback on ways in which you think it would be difficult for your Go-based implementation to consume a monthly release and test against it, I would love to hear more about that. I'm not sure that made any sense, but hopefully it did. And hopefully you can still hear me.
Okay. Well,
Yep.
Yep.
And if anybody
Let's
else has
follow up
feedback about
afterwards.
that, that'd be great too, right?
Yeah.
All right.
Okay,
Thanks
let's call
much.
it.
Appreciate it.
Thanks very much.
Bye,
Bye.
folks.